Everyone, Mr. Happy here, and welcome to Mondays with Mr. Happy, aka Mr. Happy Mondays, a weekly Q&A show where you ask me questions and I answer them. It has been a busy week, and the only break I got to take from making videos this week was to do my taxes. So it's been a week, but thankfully I like staying busy. So hopefully you guys have been enjoying the content in this last week. Without further ado, however, I have not eaten. It is 6 p.m. and I'd like to go do that. So thank you to our patrons for supporting the channel via Patreon. Completely optional. It's the same content you get here as you get there. I don't money gate any of that. Just people who like the content, they support me over there for whatever reason. And their names are scrolling on the screen. We have our Patrons of Darkness, Khuja on Jenova, and Kurenai Oni, who go above and beyond, and we appreciate them. We appreciate all of you. And I say we, but I'm here. Yeah, we all appreciate it, actually. No, you guys appreciate it too. I know you do. So without further ado, let's get to the questions. At number 1, hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hi there. Hope you're doing well. Hope the same for you. How do you handle the more tense moments between party members in your instances? Are there a few voices in the group that are able to rally the spirits when things get difficult or when mechanics aren't executed properly? So first of all, you say when you're in your instances. Most of the time, if I'm running content, I'm running it with pre-made groups. So I'm running it with friends or at least people who are familiar with me and my contents. Usually something password protected. So that's the kind of group we're talking about here. It's not complete rando. So my answer really probably doesn't apply to most people. I'm not going to lie. There's a mix of that was a good pull and, okay, seriously, though, we need to stop fucking this up. Because when it comes to the places I remember the most discussion, places I have the most experience with discussion is endgame rating. And when you're first figuring out new mechanics, it's someone pitching an idea, you trying an idea. Someone pitching an idea, you trying an idea, finding the correct answer, moving to the next thing. Once you've mapped the entire fight out, though, it becomes about people not getting hit by this random AoE, or standing in the right place when they do it this time, or making sure they're pressing their buttons while they're dodging this. And after hours and hours and hours and hours of potentially people screwing that up, I definitely get a little frustrated. So it ends up being a lot of just keeping in the frustration and putting out the how can we resolve this. Be like, okay, so we've had deaths there a lot. How do we resolve that? Like, is there something we can do different? Is there a positioning? Like, what's the issue? When deep down inside, I'm like, oh my God, just stop dying there. Just stop dying there. It's about bringing up the adult and suppressing my inner child in order to make those actually successful moments. So that's the best thing I can offer in regards to advice. That is what I will do. I will be the rallier. Even if deep down I'm like, please stop dying. Please stop dying. All right, question number 2. Hey, Haps, how you doing? I'm doing all right. You doing all right? I'm doing all right. Haven't asked a question in a while, but there's one thing I've been wondering lately. I don't think I ever heard an answer. Watch State of the Realm every week, and I was curious, where are all the nicknames you have for Sly come from? Listen, your boy Blue was him. He came up with that. And so I ended up saying Sly, a.k.a. Gray Fox, a.k.a. you, my boy Blue, how you doing? When it comes to all the nicknames, it's literally just anything he says or does or insinuates or names he's given me for him. But I don't stack nicknames like I used to because that kind of wore its welcome after doing it for a few years. So now he's Sly. That's all who he's always been, and that's who he is whenever I introduce him nowadays. Next one, hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hello, good stuff as always, thank you, and hello to you too. What would you personally want 6.1 to set up? A new threat on a cosmic level, something like Omega where you have to travel to space, or would you want to be more focused on places still unexplored? Also love your reaction to the announcements. That's something you want to continue to do with State of the Realm. Yes, but only when applicable, because sometimes it's like 3 in the morning and we do not want to be doing that. I don't mind a reaction, like maybe just me, but getting everyone together for State of the Realm, it's tough. It's tough to arrange that and make sure that it's all working properly. As for 6.1, I'm indifferent. If the writing's good, I never like to have like a preference of what we do or where we go. I mean, I've been predicting the moon for literally since we saw the Void Arc back in 3.1. So I'm just super indifferent about the whole thing. As long as it's written well, it's presented well, it's consistent, and the characters don't make me want to tear my eyes out, then I'm usually okay with anything. I would definitely like to explore some more locations on Hydaelyn, but they've shown that by taking us to another place in that of the first and soon to be the moon, that they can do all sorts of things with all sorts of locations. So Mara City and the New World, obviously high on my list, but I'm not like, give them to me now. I'm like, dude, I can't wait till we go there, whenever that may be. Next one, hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey Haps, hope you're having a great week and ready to go explore the moon in Endwalker. First time asking, so here I go. Hello, welcome, and thank you. I've been loving Bosja and DR since it released like you and was curious if it could potentially set up for future expansion zones with things like CE, solo duels, etc. What I wanted to discuss is DR's penalty system, Twice Come Ruin. As a hardcore player, what are your thoughts on it? If yes, is there something you want to see more in the future in hardcore content as opposed to the vulnerability up penalty debuff we are so used to? I'm also kind of indifferent about this. There are times where something like Twice Come or Thrice Come Ruin makes a lot of sense. I think specifically in the context of if you die, there's no easy way to resurrect you, and you have things like, massive tank essences available, and that's kind of a standard thing. Trying to discourage people from just trying to be tanky enough to survive everything, I think is a better approach than just trying to make them take more and more damage, because that's still something you're going to mitigate with, like, plate bearers or veterans going into normal or even savage. I mean, pure essences are damn near mandatory, so I don't even really consider, I just don't consider being any less tanky than that on savage mode. So I'm more looking at things like CEs and duels, like you mentioned earlier, than I am at things like the penalty system, because I think the penalty system needs to be more reflective of the encounter and not necessarily the same across every encounter. I just think it works particularly in Delubrum because of the reasons I just mentioned. I know in normal mode there's not that permadeath's not there, but let's be real, they made the savage and then went back and downscaled to normal and probably just kept all the attacks doing Twice and Thrice Come Ruin for, consistency reasons. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hello there, Happy, and greetings from Luxembourg. I'm so sorry for the pronunciation. And hello. My question is related to the role of healer. Healers having or wanting to do DPS all the time is starting to get pretty frustrating. I do understand, though, that when everyone is full HP, I shouldn't just stand around and do nothing. In other MMOs I played, I was always busy healing, shielding, or buffing at little to no time to DPS. I kind of miss that. In 14, DPS has become king, and if you don't do enough, no matter what role you're playing, you'll be cast aside. Do you think they should make endgame fights more heal-intensive so the healers are kept busy with healing and shielding? Thanks. Listen, I'll say E12. They did a pretty damn good job of... Actually, this entire last raid tier with Eden's Promise was the case. And you know what? Ultimates have always been rather heal-intensive throughout the most of them. But what will never happen is it will never be about every GCD being a heal. The pace of the game just doesn't allow it. With a 2.5 second GCD, every decision you make has to have sort of like a cooldown period where you have enough time to make another decision. And it's not a lot of snap decision making. It's a lot of processing what you're going to need to do ahead of it actually happening. So a lot of pre-planning for things as opposed to reacting to a situation. That's not to say there isn't reactions, so who gets targeted by what and where you need to stand and what markers over your head, what markers over their head, where are they standing, where are you standing. All those things exist, but they're within a confined enough realm of possibility that you should always be prepared for whatever the occurrence itself will be. Everything in between that should be DPS when you're playing at the highest level. That's something that needs to be worked on, of course. You don't start with that mentality, you don't start with that skill set, but it is a degree of mastery that is present in 14 that is honestly kind of... I'm a big fan. I've healed through the TBC and Wrath and a little bit of the Cataclysm era of World of Warcraft, where there is a lot more, healing that goes on constantly. But I never ever felt stressed by it. Granted, I will say that being a Resto Druid in TBC, I felt was a joke, so maybe that's just me, I don't know, but that was hilariously easy, and that's probably the reason why I feel that way. And being a Holy Paladin and Wrath was a whole nother story. There's a lot of things that go into it. So I'm kind of indifferent. I like that mastery level of not just being about spamming heal buttons and about being, how can I provide as much of this utility in the form of damage while still making sure I 100% complete my role and what's expected of me. I feel like, again, in Ultimates and higher tier Savages, that's normal. In the rest of the game, you're never going to see that because the skill differential and the skill requirement to do that in a game with such a long GCD would basically destroy the entire casual player base. I hate to say it, but that is the truth. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hi, Mr. Happy. Hope you're having a good week. Solid one. Thank you. Sound like a good idea to farm those extreme mounts solo unsync before the stats push. Which extreme trials are doable at 80? May I suggest to do a guide on solo extreme trials? So first of all, I've posted tons of videos of extreme trials. Everything through Heaven's Word is soloable. And Lakshmi is technically soloable on Extreme, and then that's where it ends. Rathalos Extreme is also soloable, but that's kind of a very different style of trial. I think, again, a lot of people are really misunderstanding what the stat squish is actually going to be doing. You are not going to have issues unsyncing old trials when we hit level 90. At level 80, unsyncing old trials will be harder after the stat squish. At 90, it will be easy as fuck. So I wouldn't worry about it altogether. There's definitely going to be some more that are soloable once we hit 90. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hello, Happy, longtime viewer and first-time asker. Have some really great pizza as a bonus. I've lived on the West Coast now for over 5 years, and I miss good pizza. I really do. Question, what are your thoughts about deep dungeons? Do you like what they've done in Shadowbringers with Bozja for leveling alts, or would you rather see a new deep dungeon? I hate deep dungeons. They're fun for like a little bit, and then I can't stand them. Like, get like a week, and I'm completely done. I'm completely phased out of them. I want nothing to do with them. They're so boring. Like, soloing in them is fun. That's like the one thing I kind of enjoy doing. But even that, like, that's why I like Heaven on High so much better than Palace, because if you're gonna do a solo attempt, it's at least somewhat reasonable. Doing Palace, you gotta start at floor 1, or you just don't get the full clear credit. It's 200 floors. Oh, it's so agonizingly annoying and boring at the same time, and I just can't take it. I don't want to deny people who like Deep Dungeon their opportunity to get another Deep Dungeon. They've already mentioned that when they announced Deep Dungeon would be going away, they were surprised to see there were a bunch of people who were like, oh, that's disappointing, and I was just as surprised as well. So if the community wants a Deep Dungeon, release it, let them have it, they can enjoy it. I will probably run it for a few days and never touch it again, because I don't like Deep Dungeons very much. I've tried not to level in them. I don't want them, but I won't deny other people who do want them. I'd rather have something like Bozja any day. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey, Haps, hope you're doing well. Hope you're just as excited as myself for the expansion. Yes, I'm excited. Until it's been so long that we're like, oh, please, I just need it now. But luckily, we've got Outriders, BD2, we got Monster Hunter Rise, we got Kena. Kena's another one that I'm looking at next month. Can't wait for that. So yeah, I'm excited. For the question, it's potentially simple or potentially complicated. How do you personally avoid burnout from 14 as a streamer and content creator for the game? I know many people just play the game, simply take a break when they get burnout, but as a content creator, how do you avoid it? I stop playing when I don't want to play it. It's quite frankly the same as anyone else should be treating any video game. I will take a monetary hit most of the time because I've built my entire channel around it, but I'm generally okay with that for the sake of my own mental health. I have enough of a reliable viewer base, people who enjoy my content, that I can do that, take a monetary hit, and still generally be okay. I'm someone who does my finances quite closely, so I always make sure I have room for times like that. YouTube is a toss-up. Sometimes there's plenty of things I want to make videos about. Sometimes I get writer's block, and even if I have ideas, I can't finish them. And a lot of the time, that's completely independent of how I feel about 14 at any given moment. It's really only those 7 hours a day that I'm streaming where I look at 14 and go, is there anything I really want to work on? Like, is there really anything I want to work on? Or can I spend maybe an hour or two and then go play Genshin, or go play Bravely Default 2, or go play Kena, or go play the Outriders demo, or whatever it is I want to go play. Go shiny hunt in Pokemon. Whatever it is I want to do. But I do the same thing as anyone else. If I don't want to play it, I don't play it. Simple. Before I actually answer this question, I scrolled past another one where somebody said they were using Surfshark and then worrying about latency. Just so you guys know, I'm sponsored by Surfshark. They sponsor the channel. I've got commands for them on Twitch. I've done ad space for them. You don't use security-based VPNs for video games. Security-based VPNs are for browsing the internet, protecting your information on your mobile devices and things like that. That's what my Surfshark sponsorship is for. That is not a video game latency reducer. In fact, when you go to encrypt files as the packets are being sent or received, it's going to increase your latency. So you don't use it while playing a game, because that will happen if you do that. Just saw that. I didn't want to do a whole thing, but I guess I did a whole thing anyway, so I guess it doesn't matter. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey there, Mr. Happy. I started watching your streams a few weeks ago, and you hear that? I'd say I really enjoy hopping in for a little bit, see how everyone's doing. There's more community there than just hanging around in the game and talking with people in FC. Which leads me to this question. Well, first of all, hello, and thank you. Glad you enjoy it. I know they built Community Finder. I'm not a super big fan of that thing. But are they going to update the free companies more to where people feel more invested in them? Just seems like there's a lot of things missing with free companies, or that people can't stay connected very well to them. I think the big thing is we've moved into a generation where it's so easy to stay connected with people. Discords or Community Finder or whatever it is you're going to be using. And it's so much so to the point where no matter what they do with FCs, outside of forcing you to play together for a large activity, it's going to be hard pressed to ever get anyone that feels like they're forced to be connected to it. The days of like forcing people to feel connected to something through some sort of content or something, those days have largely gone. in my opinion. Not to say people can't do it. There are people who have the capabilities or the desire to pursue this, and then they find groups like that together, and they're usually long-lasting friendships, assuming the people get along in the first place. But the masses of people, the average player, that's not something that people are always looking to commit to. It's something that's very particular on an individual-to-individual basis. And I think unless they force you through some activity with the free company to interact with your FC on a regular basis, then it's always, I think that the days of that have come and gone. So I wouldn't be opposed to activities that are more FC focused, but I don't think they're going to have a lasting effect on the way people treat them versus the multitude of other ways they have to communicate with other people. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey, Haps, hope you're doing all right. I'm doing all right. You doing all right? I'm doing all right. Long-time viewer, first-time asker, wondering your thoughts about a couple aspects of Endwalkers. Okay. How do you feel about the decision to have Endwalker story conclude on patch 6.0? I like the idea of getting a whole storyline right at the launch of expansion, but I'm worried that 5 patches to build up towards the next expansion or smaller scale stories to tide us over might feel a bit excessive. No, I'm a big fan of this. I think that going into an expansion being like, okay, I beat the expansion. Like it just came out, and it's over, right? And then it's not. It's not. You have 2 more patches of building up to the actual finale. I think it'll feel really good to go into an expansion, finish the actual base story right off the bat, knowing that everything is a mystery. It's like full speculation mode for everything that goes on from that point on. I'm a little worried it's going to feel like a Realm Reborn. So Realm Reborn technically finished their base story right with the defeat of the Ultima weapon, and then spent 5 patches prepping Heaven's Ward and actually laying the foundation for a lot of things. So my number one concern is not that it's going to feel excessive, but that if people weren't big fans of the foundation setting tone of a Realm Reborn, which had us dealing with problem A, problem B, primal A, primal B, I don't know how people are going to receive 5 patches of what would presume to be that very foundational setting that we're going to be getting. So I'm super excited. I can't wait to see the end of this arc end in 6.0 instead of waiting for 6.3. But I am concerned that other people will not be as excited for 6.1 and onward, even though I know I will be. The announcement of data center travel, what do you expect the limitations to be? I think that they said there will be more limitations. I think that's reasonable. I think the hunt or maybe even just open world activities in general, things like treasure maps and whatnot, might be restricted. I think no hunt coordinator wants to worry about people data center traveling and like going through discords and being like, oh, this data center is running this hunt. And I honestly think it's too much effort for most people to even bother doing it. So I'm not, maybe it's the wrong thing to be concerned about. The only thing that matters to me is whether or not you can queue up with friends into the duty finder or party finder, because that is the chief reason that I want data center travel. And I think that'll be fine, because when they already described that when you travel to another data center via this new feature, you're essentially doing it from the login screen. So you go to the login screen and it's kind of like changing your data center there. You know, you're like, oh, I want to connect to Primal, and then I'll log in on this character. Which means that at any given time, you have to go to, for example, Primal's data center or Crystal's data center or Elemental's data center. You can't be on Ether and be looking for parties on another data center. It shouldn't work like that if they've described it properly. My chief concern is that it's going to make one data center more popular for pugging content than any other one. For example, let's say everyone decides, well, if you want to do content, you have to go to Ether. Now, everyone just hops off Primal and Crystal if they're planning on raiding to use Ether's party finder. And that may be a good enough reason for them to be like, yeah, maybe we shouldn't allow that. And then that would completely kill off the idea for me, because that's the chief reason that I want it. So I'm going back and forth about whether or not that's a good or a bad thing. And that's going to be the one thing I'm paying the most attention to result-wise. Hello, hashtag Mr. Is that my name now? I'm now hashtag Mondays, Mr. Happy Mondays. That's the new channel name. That's the new brand. We only post content on Mondays, no other days, unless every day is actually Monday. How you doing? I'm doing all right. You doing all right? I'm doing all right. You spoke a lot about code and engine reworks this week. At what point do you think they'll stop working on 14 and start making a new game? I love 14, but it'd be nice to have a new engine and maybe a new battle system that is more action-based, similar to Terra, Blade, and Soul. I'm going to heavily disappoint you, because the answer is not until 14 stops making money. Because they already have 3 MMOs in Square Enix, Dragon Quest X, Final Fantasy XI, and Final Fantasy XIV. They've openly stated it doesn't make any sense that they have 3 different ones, because they essentially develop their own competition, which is very, very strange. Even if they're very different games, still, it's very unusual for people to be subscribed to multiple different MMOs at the same time. When you provide multiple ones, you're essentially overlapping within your own genre. They've openly stated that alone, not to mention the sheer amount of effort that goes into running. Even Final Fantasy XI, which is essentially a skeleton crew, still has to go through quite a bit of time and QA and effort in order for them to get anything done. And that has its own struggles with them still needing to use PS2 dev kits in order to even work on that game. Making a fourth MMO is not in the cards. It's just not going to happen internally, at the very least. Maybe they partner with a development team that is working on an action MMO and Square Enix publishes it. That wouldn't surprise me all too much. We've already seen them start to delve into looters with that of Avengers and soon to be Outriders. We're seeing, of course, a lot of classic RPGs coming to the forefront from all sorts of different development studios, all being published under Square Enix. So not unreasonable for that, but they're not ever going to stop working on 14 or completely change its battle system in order to, and I quote, make with the times. They'd have to be working with some outside crew that they're just publishing the game for. Because if the game is successful, they're not going to be like, fuck it, we don't want it. A new engine with the same battle system, I think it's unavoidable at some point. But a new battle system or a new game, not going to happen. Not for a very, very long time. Like, it's going to be a very, very long time before you ever see that. Probably a decade at least. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey Haps, hope you're doing alright. First time asker, but long time viewer. Welcome, and hello to you too. I have two questions, but I'll try to keep them both brief. They look pretty brief to me. Do you think that one of the main reasons the relic grind this expansion has been easier than previous is because we have too many jobs currently? I know a lot of people just love collecting relics, and if they do the same grind as, say, the Zodiac for 17 jobs, soon to be 19, I'm sure most wouldn't even bother continuing it after one weapon. Shit. We only had, 13 weapons 11 weapons back then, and I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do more than one. I don't know how some people grinded all of those. No, I don't think that's actually the reason. I think they finally realized that the relic is something for their casual player base. So originally the relic was supposed to be the casual option to obtaining more power via the weapon slot. And it was supposed to be, they said it was grind for power versus skill for power. Skill for power being stuff from the raids. What ended up happening, though, is that raids end up being grind for power as well. It's not like you're just good enough and you one-shot them all and you've never done them before. That's not how it works. You generally still put in equal to or sometimes more time before you ever see the loot that you actually want, especially in the case of the weapon coming from the final encounter. So they realized that essentially they were making a weapon that was so long to grind that only the most hardcore people would do it, and those same most hardcore people were probably people who were doing Savage Raids. Not an entire overlap, but it definitely would dissuade people who are on the more casual side from participating in it. So what did they do? They gradually nerf it over time, and that's when they'd see a huge uptick in the number of people who would be approaching them. So with that data on its own, it makes perfect sense why they would be like, okay, we want you to grind, we want to keep you subscribed, but we also realize that you need to feel good about the progress that's actually happening at this point. So I think that's where we got to where we are now. I'm not going to lie, even the Eureka ones were really easy. Eureka itself just took a little while to actually progress, especially if you were someone who is very unfamiliar with the system or very uncomfortable with it, I should say as well. So I think that's really the primary reason. It's just they saw that their target demographic, they weren't actually designing it for their target demographic. It was just being designed as something, a hardcore grind to keep people subbed, and that was more likely to put people away than it was to keep them actually subscribed like they initially planned. As for my second question, do you feel getting BIS isn't as necessary or rewarding as it was in previous expansions? Outside of being geared for Ultimate, it was never that big of a deal to be BIS. Like, yeah, you hit harder than everyone else when you did weeklies or like Duty Finder and stuff. That was all it was ever really good for. When we got Ultimate, you know, we've had 3 so far, and will be the case till 6.1. You know, you could be like, okay, I'm getting BIS for Ultimate, you know, and that makes perfect sense, you know. But that was it. It was never anything more than that, and I always feel like people maybe remember things a little bit differently from the way they were versus like what they actually were. Like they think it was different than it actually was. And it's never been that big a deal. As soon as you can beat the raid tier, getting BIS is a luxury outside of needing to be geared for Ultimate or to be geared for the next raid tier. I'd say the real thing that people don't worry about BIS as much, if there isn't an Ultimate, is since we got crafted gear, because you just buy a whole set of crafted gear if you're really a hardcore raider. So, maybe that does make BIS feel less good to get if you don't have an Ultimate that you're preparing for. But I think it's always been kind of like whatever. I'll get it sooner or later. You know, get this weekly, that weekly, get a piece here, piece there. Especially because the looting system's gotten so much more consistent. You just get it done a whole lot faster. So there's a few factors that go into it, but no, I don't think it's any less rewarding. It's just people are more aware of how meaningless it kind of always was outside of Ultimate. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. How are you doing? You know what? You didn't say hello, but you did ask me how I was doing, and that's acceptable. Long-time viewer, first-time asker. I just wanted to get your thoughts on the delayed release of Ultimate next expansion. I've seen a little of both sides here and there. I've seen a lot of hardcore players disappointed over this and wanted to know your thoughts. See, I'm not someone who only wants to raid in Final Fantasy XIV. I actually do enjoy having time to mess with other features of the game. You know, I've done my mount farming this expansion. Obviously, we had Delibrum Savage. I've done like several dozen Delibrum normals. I do Castrums on the regular. You know, I level every job to max level. I do my beast tribes. I do my fates. I do my trust leveling. I'm doing ocean fishing right now. I work on relic A, B, C, D. I get armor sets for this job, for that job, even if I'm never going to play them. So I play a lot of different things. And Ultimate being delayed is just not the end of the world for me. As far as I'm concerned, that's an extra week of sleep that I'm going to get, because I otherwise definitely would have a hard time sleeping when I'm hyped up on that prog adrenaline, as is normally the case. So I'm super indifferent. If it's what the result is of a pandemic. If it was just like they said, screw it. If it was like the world was perfectly normal and they just said, screw it. It was whatever. We messed up and we'll do it later. I'd be more upset. But given the state of the world, I'm not going to be upset about this, even in the slightest. Extra week of sleep, and that's the end of it for me. Hashtag Mr. I almost said hashtag. Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey, Happy. Greetings from the UK. Greetings from the US. Couple of questions. Content creation. Okay. I upload 3 videos per week and still have a low view and watch numbers. Have you any tips on how to improve these? So uploading just 3 times. So first of all, I want to say, yes, the first step to actually getting any views is to upload content. But it depends on the kind of content you're uploading. For example, my YouTube channel got its lift largely because I was posting about Final Fantasy XIV stuff well before anyone else was. You know, I knew that the Realm Reborn was going to be coming out, and I was seeing news pop up here or there. We had little tidbits, and I was like, you know what? I'm not seeing anyone really do anything with this. You know, I'm sure there are people out there who are curious about this game and like the story that it's had and like how it's changing, and is it really possible to even save it? And that passion drove me to make content that just nobody else was making at the time. Now, obviously, there's tons of great content creators who present their opinions and present news to a ton of viewers on YouTube. And I think the YouTube community for 14 is way more thriving than any of the other communities that the game actually has. But that's my knowledge speaking about just 14. What you upload, I don't necessarily know how to judge. Because if it's just like you playing a game, it is nigh impossible outside of some insanely lucky or well-timed video releases to just put out videos of you playing a game and it blasting off. Now, obviously, there's things like search engine optimization, clickbait. I know a lot of people say, oh, that's clickbait. That's so stupid. There's a reason people do it. It's because the system, the algorithm, as people know it, looks for certain words and certain catchphrases and funky thumbnails and things. That's why even sometimes I'll throw a truth in my title, but it's designed to look like clickbait. Like, it'll be like, no more ultimates and Shadowbringers, Final Fantasy XIV latest news. Like, I'll lead with that like super big headline because that gets people going like, oh my god, I gotta click that. And then when they see click through, it works. So sometimes, yeah, people don't want to admit, but you gotta have a title that's like cleverly clickbaity. Like, it's technically true, but it's like exacerbated or exaggerated. That's what I was looking for. And that usually helps as well. But learning search engine optimization, learning how to do proper titles, proper thumbnails, and making sure your content's timely about something that people are genuinely interested in is a way to increase viewership. There is no catch-20 though. You could do all of those things and get nothing because the algorithm doesn't favor you because one thing is on or off, or you haven't shown any traction and it's looking for that. So honestly, it's a grind. I always say that those of us in this position, some of us were smart about timing or about the type of content we made, and some of us got lucky. I like to think I'm a little bit of both. I think my timing was great, but I'm lucky that I still get to do it now, and now that's no longer the luxury that I have. Getting in first was great, but still being around is a very, very different story. 2, do you use any kind of soundproofing? No. And I can see what the words are that I'm about to read. I have quite a loud voice, and my partner frequently comments on being able to hear me while recording and streaming. Man, have you ever heard me stream at 3 in the morning? Because that's how she wishes I would talk all the time. I have the same problem. So my door is closed, and that's about as good as it gets. Oh man, my channel's been so busy this last week. We have so many questions. I'm not going to get to all of these questions. There are I'm going to have to start lightning rounding soon so I can get through some of them. Some of them are repeats, but I think other than that, it should be fine. Hashtag Mrhappy Money's hello haps. So about damage meters, do you think they'll ever officially add one? And if they're worried about toxicity, couldn't they just add one where only you can see your damage numbers? Because as a PS4 player, I really want to improve, but I don't have any way other than Stone Sky Sea. At what point would you consider a player good enough to do Savage Ultimates? Well, that's a loaded question at the very end. When would I consider them good enough? When they can do their rotation without guessing what they're pressing next. Or, and I say or because sometimes people do that while they're getting used to content. Or when you can do a fight without stopping everything you're doing. Like if you can do an extreme trial and at no point you just like stop and go, I need to focus. Because that's a sign that you're never able to really commit to both how well you're playing and where you're actually standing or positioning in a fight. And that is a key thing when you're doing serious content in pretty much any game. Now, as for the personal meters, this has been brought up a million times over. Why don't they just do a meter only you can see? Well, there's two reasons. One, FF log still exists. That's not going to change. Even if you have no way of uploading your own logs, people who use it to, to judge whether or not someone should be in a group or whether they should be in a static or whatever. If they see you have no logs loaded, there are people who just won't invite you. That's just the reality of the situation. I don't agree with it, but it is the reality of the situation. Odds are if you're doing Party Finder content also, somebody else is parsing you and you can usually find stuff that you've done on FF logs. As for the personal meter itself, having a personal meter doesn't mean that only you're going to know that information because other people still do have FF logs. And on top of that, if let's say FF logs didn't exist and we only had those personal meters, people are going to ask you to send them video and or screenshots of your meters in specific scenarios and specific fights. It will not stop anything. So if 14 has an official means of using it, meaning they implement it into the game, now they're responsible for that activity. They have to be held accountable, and that's not something that they want. They'd rather tell you they're technically not allowed. We know you're using them. Don't use them to harass people, and it'll be okay. Because otherwise, they're not going to launch wide-scale investigations into people using an in-game parser to judge whether or not somebody should or shouldn't be on a team, because there's a debate of whether or not that's toxic or efficient. So they don't want to have to be the ones mediating and being responsible for that, so they probably won't ever do it. All right, so there are a lot of questions, so we're going to try to lightning round them from this point on. So I'm coming up on close to 40 minutes of my recording. It's probably like 35 minutes in the actual video, and we got a lot. So I'm going to start from the bottom and work my way up. So somebody asked why can't they make all the healers capable of being pure or barrier healers like they do with tanks being main or off tank. The big thing with being a main or off tank is you don't essentially have to pick one at the start of the fight. With healers, you have to pick, am I going to be pure healer? Am I going to be barrier healer? And in that case, one of them is almost always mathematically better than the other, which meaning everyone's always going to lean towards trying to be a specific composition with them. It's the same as basically having specs for jobs. One will always be better, and it's a problem Astro's dealt with pretty much since its inception, where one has been always better and people hate playing the other one. So it's just going to remove that problem, and I think this is probably going to be the right call for that, because they just can't decide, before starting a fight which one they are. I mean, the tanks don't have to make that decision. I think you get the point. I don't think I need to repeat it. So I see Time Bubble comments. Why do people like Blitzball? Man, I don't give a fuck what you're doing on Mondays. Well, then why would you type something? You clearly care enough because you wrote me a comment. That doesn't make any sense. By logic, why can't we glamour in any city? If we want, it's in the city. I don't see the problem. You can glamour in residential areas where we can also get in combat training dummies. That's a good point. I wonder if there is a more in-depth reason. It might have to do with the code of the actual zones then, because I know they are very, very concerned with the transfer of data whenever you actually use that. So the zones must have been coded on the base level, a decent bit different that allows it to be a safer transfer of data than any variables that might be present in the other ones. Somebody says, I think 14 is killing you. I can tell you have a lot of stress. No, this is just what I've gotten used to in the last year. This was pandemic phase, and I've just gotten used to fixing this every about 3 months or so. We're coming up on that. I definitely got to do it. Jobs starting at higher levels, they make so many things a grind. Why not let all jobs start at level 1? It's very disheartening for players, especially a lot of newer players, when they have to start all the way from level 1 when a new expansion just came out. It's like, oh, I'm so excited to play this new expansion. I can't wait to do the story and get into the end game stuff. But by the way, I got to do 80 levels, and then I still have to do 10 levels after that. It takes away a lot of the excitement. It's why World of Warcraft stopped doing it when they started doing Death Knights later on, because quite frankly, you know what it's like to level from those levels, and they don't need to ask you to do them all from scratch again. Let's see, what else do we have? Why have you cursed me like this? I'm a faithful pup main in 11. They bring Pup Eorzi as a tank. I won't even have a choice. Listen, they won't listen to me. It's going to be a limited job. Don't worry, you won't even have to play it. Let's see. Kill for an engine rewrite. My girlfriend's a massive fashionista. The new hairstyle's not from DR Savage. It's from DR Normal. So you don't have to worry about that. Just keep doing normal and you'll get it. It doesn't come from Savage. So that, I think somebody even commented under that for that one. There's a lot of questions about engine overhauls. I kind of already covered them in the one engine overhaul question, where whether or not I think they'll do it or if it needs to be done. So I think that kind of encompasses most people's questions on the engine overhaul. And so I don't know. I don't really know how to add anything to any of these questions that have that stuff. But I don't think we'll see one anytime soon. I don't think it's even recently really possible. There was a recent Q&A where Yoshi said they're working on a new engine for the game. All right, let me take a peek at that real quick. Said they are working on a new engine for the game. No, I've read through this already. This doesn't make any mention of them saying we are working. We said we do think of reworking the graphics engine in the future. They've been thinking about it. That's not a new comment at all. That's from the Famitsu interview, which is also the Game Watch interview, which I covered on this channel. But they never say they're working on it. They said we've considered, and that's something they've been talking about for years. So their statement on it hasn't changed in all of these years. Let's see, where do you think the 5 slots are going to end up with that they're banking from the belt removal? I think they'll just eventually end up being weapons or rings. I think they'll just end up being one or the other of the things they're already giving us more of. Helping a group that's new to harder content get through Emerald Extreme and starting Savage. Starting to seem like some people are going at it more casually than others. Yeah, that's always the problem with helping new people into Extreme or Savage. You very quickly pick out who actually cares about beating the content versus who's just happy to be there. So it's very, very tough. And I've seen it destroy friendships before. It depends on how the maturity of people understanding a difference in goal, and honestly, sometimes that's really, really hard to come by. But you may have to start cutting people if you want to make serious progress. Sometimes you got to cut the people that aren't taking it seriously. What would be the most cursed feature 14 could add? Blitzball. Anyway, moving on to the next one. Someone who has not played healer, which one should I start with practicing for Sage? I think starting as Conjurer and White Mage is the best no matter what healer you want to play afterwards, because it's all fundamental. It's very basic, it's very straightforward. Then you add the element of having to deal with barriers. So I'd say start with White Mage, then move to Scholar, because it is a barrier healer, and Astro is going to be changed so much so that maybe you don't want to practice that. Not to mention Astro is a lot more about mastering the card system on top of doing your healing than it is about actually the barrier-esque gameplay that you're going to be focusing on. Scholar feels a lot more actually heavily focused on the barrier gameplay. The question is, any point before 6.0 we'll get some shiny versions of the Shadowbringer Trials weapons? No, that is something that we will probably not see for a very, very long time. The closest thing you'll get to a glowy Shadowbringer's weapon is likely to be the Resistance weapon, which is not a version of the Trial weapons. It took us forever to get Zervan weapons, and that was Heaven's Ward. So I don't think we're going to be seeing those any time soon. Somebody said their question didn't make it last week, even because they didn't include a hashtag, but they did also say I get a bonus of a steak dinner at a 3-star Michelin restaurant, so I got to at least put this in the lightning round. My thought on the data center visit system. I think I covered that pretty in depth. You don't think so? Your counterpoint is you don't think it'll cause problems after the first few weeks, and that's why I'm weighing, like, will what I'm afraid of actually come to pass? I'm not saying it will. I'm saying it's a concern. So I think it's possible. We've seen how people handle mass migrations to raid-centric areas. It happened with Gilgamesh way back when, and it's one of the reasons I'm even on Gilgamesh as we speak right now. So I don't know. I don't know. Obviously, we won't be able to talk in FC or Link Shell. You even bring that up here. But there's definitely going to be more restrictions. It's just a matter of what they are, and I can't really pinpoint anything extra than what I said before. 14's a decade old. Do you think the spaghetti code and some of its archaic system needs to be addressed? I mean, they've gradually addressed them over time. And they already addressed a bunch of them going from 1.0 to 2.0. It was just that 2.0 has a lot of it left over. It's the reason why the class system hasn't been removed from the game, on top of lore reasons as well. I don't think we're going to be seeing a major engine, like I said in the other question, I don't think we'll see a major engine rewrite anytime soon. The game is largely functional as is. The few things that are there that are annoying are not so game breaking that it's costing them money or costing them subscribers, and they can focus on putting out content that is quality that people are thanking them for and enjoying them for over these little things without having to stop and focus on only these things that have kind of accrued over time. It's unavoidable. They will have to address it. And I think that, 7.0, maybe 8.0, it has to happen. And I think we will get an engine rewrite at some point. So I'm hoping that they are actually working on that. Even though the previous question said they already were, that's not what they said in the interview. I kind of wish that is what they said in the interview, though, because that would be a good thing to see. Somebody had something about a follow-up to the Melee Geomancer question from last week. How about Y'shtola becomes a new Melee job? No, it's going to be Xenos. That's pretty much it. That's all it is. She just got her change. She ain't going anywhere. She went from White Mage to Sorceress, as you have pointed out here. Do you think the stat squish will require them to work or upscale the current ultimates to 90? No. I think they should. I think it's actually a great idea, especially to make up for the fact that they're doing the stat squish. It almost might be easier for them to do it than it is to try and squish the ultimates properly. I don't think that's the route they're going to take, though. But I'd really like it if they did. Do you think Data Center Business System will help or hurt Crystal? I don't think it'll matter. Crystal's reputation is largely because of role players. And if anything, role players on other data centers will come to Crystal. And that's okay. That's fine. It doesn't matter if Raiders go to another data center and RPers come to Crystal. I think Crystal's reputation is kind of just always going to stay the same, even if there are some great people and some great Raiders that are on that data center. I don't think it's ever going to change. It's like people still meme on Dragoons for being dead all the time. Bro, Ninja's Assassinate is way more memey than Dragoon Jumps. Trust me on that one. They are the new Dragoons and nobody gives them credit for it. How do you think they go about scaling down food? I mean, does food scale based on our item level increase? The food has item level itself, so they probably just downscale it the same way, to be completely honest. Somebody said they think it's impossible to predict jobs. Yeah, I said that in my job prediction video, which this was asked before I put up the follow-up video. Yeah, it's tough. I don't think it's possible. I'd rather just guess the weapon. And I don't even have to guess the role anymore. I just think any name somebody says is, you could be right and not feel any better about it. They'd be like, yeah, I got it. And be like, yeah, but how did you get to that? I'd be like, I don't know. It's like, that's how I feel like most predictions are going to be. And I think that makes the eventual announcement way more fun, in my opinion. Let's see. Then there's one here where they want Mara City to be a PvP-enabled map. That is not going to happen. They said they've toyed around with that internally. And while you may see a dedicated zone for PvP at some point, like one that is almost like a winter grasp more so than anything else, they're not going to base a whole expansion in all of its zones around that. I'm not going to lie, Final Fantasy XIV's biggest problem is all of its PvP is large scale, and there are not enough people interested in doing it. So the fact that they're moving to small scale PvP, again, similar to our 8-man feast days that we had originally, I think is the right play, and I don't think this game can sustain a full-on PvP zone. It's just not that type of game, especially not if it's like in the midst of like objectives people are trying to do for daily quests or story progression. It's not going to fly in this particular MMO. And I think that's it for all the questions that were like after what I had scrolled past. Somebody said what new no, and then there's like some questions that I had to skip over because they were either repeats or I didn't have good answers for them. What UI control features would you like to see added? Eggy Glamour. It needs its own UI if they ever do it. So that's kind of the big one for me. How do you get rid of that damn speech bubble? I don't think you can get rid of the speech bubble. There's a lot of mechanics that are, what's it called? That are, I guess, telegraphed via that bubble. And I think it's there very much on purpose so you can use it as a form of telegraph. Obviously, it's not always used for that, but it is used for that quite frequently. So I don't think there is a way. I've never tried, and so I don't have an answer, unfortunately. What else do we have here? I know there's definitely more questions that I kind of went over. Yeah, here's another engine question that I went over. I just don't have anything else to really add to those. Let's see. Something would happen. Oh, somebody asking if we get maiming in 6.0, doesn't that mean we get scouting in 7.0? I won't rule it out, but at that point, we'll have just gotten a melee. I think that'll be enough to sate it, like having just gotten a melee. I think 8.0, though, definitely scouting. That's going to be what my prediction is. Actually, you know what? That's not true. I think if we do get 2 jobs in 7.0, it'll be scouting and casting. They'll do double DPS like they did in Stormblood. That's my prediction. Locking it in. I can't wait to be wrong, and it's another tank. Or they do tank healer. They're just like, who cares? We just added a healer. We'll add a tank and a healer because we had 2 DPS. No, Yoshi P himself straight up said that he feels that because DPS is one of the most attractive roles to the average player, they always need a new DPS. So if we go down to 1 job at expansion, it'll be a DPS. Unless, of course, it's been multiple times in a row. Then they'll probably have to come up with something. It's why they may not actually only do 1 job per expansion at any point, because they will always feel obligated to add a DPS, and then they'll probably always feel obligated to either add a second DPS or one of the other, tank healer. What else do we have here? If you choose 1 character to die in 14 in an epic way, I don't want to think about anyone dying. Actually, that's not true. Ida can die. That's fine. And I don't care if it's epic. It's just she. And yes, I'm calling her Ida. I don't want to call her Lise because I liked her when she was Ida. Lise is so much more boring than Ida for me. So Lise can die. It doesn't even have to be epic. That's fine. I can live without her. I think Fordola is probably going to get something pretty. I think Fordola is going to die in 6.0. I think it's going to be spectacularly at that. Let's see. Someone was asking, what would you do to gear up a new job? Buy all the crafted gear, and then you're geared. That's it. You're done. That's it. Just buy all the crafted gear for that job, and you're done. Because then when the odd-numbered patch hits, you can upgrade that 10 more item levels. You're done. Unless you get some Savage gear, some 24-man gear, or maybe Bozja's got new gear in 5.5x. You're done. That's it. You finished. Let's see. There's the Surfshark comment from earlier. Potentially simple or complicated. Great pizza. Thank you again for that. Stat Squish question. What is your opinion on Bozja Relic Quest? I think I kind of covered that with the other answer, so that's why I skipped over that one. Do you think we'll have a time skip at the end of 6.0? No. Maybe a month. Maybe a month or 2, but that's about it. And for Summoner, would you like to see everything moved into a Trance-esque system? I'm still going to stick to my particular guess of what they would do with a rework for Summoner, or what my preferred rework would look like. The thing where it plays it kind of a little bit more like Bard, where it goes stance, 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 Bahamut, and then Phoenix is its own separate cooldown once every 2 minutes. I personally am just in that boat more than anything else. Healers wanting to do DPS all the time. No, okay, I did that one. That's the setup for future stuff with Bozja. You look like the guy from Is It a Good Idea to Microwave This? Well, maybe I am. I'm not. That'd be cool. What do you think of these 3 dancer changes? What do you think of? Questions are always tough. That's probably why I skipped over that one, because what I think is largely irrelevant. It doesn't impact the game in any way, so for me, they're not really that fun of a question to actually answer. What else do we got? What is your favorite Eden Savage fight? The last one. It's always the last one, unless the last one is absolute shit like Final Omega was, in which case O11 I liked over O12. But for E12, it's definitely E12. I think they'll release another Deep Dungeon. They commented that they're working on one, so it's highly likely that they will. Why do the Elven Knights in Lakeland look like Heartless? That's actually the main story of that zone, and those elves are actually pretty interesting. I would actually go through each of those quests and all of the fate chain and actually read what's going on in that one, because it's actually a pretty cool story. But I'm going to let you explore that on your own. As for why they look like that, I mean, you'll find out when you play through the story. At least you'll be able to make some sense of it at the very least. That's the tense party member one. Let's see. Explain the why of the mechanics. Worried about... yeah, no, I saw that one. I think that's it. That's it for questions. Some people mentioning Dissidia, how I need a shave, and you're 100% right about that. But that is going to be a wrap for this episode of Mondays with Mr. Happy, now that we've gone through the end I quote lightning round. Unquote. Thank you for asking all of your questions. If you have a question, be sure to ask it in the comment section of the video below, and I will get to it next week with the hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy, or Mr. Happy Mondays, or whatever. People change it all the time. I just look for the hashtag. But anyway, thank you for watching. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share, and I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, take care.